What should you do when it seems like, maybe it feels like, the only reasonable response to your current situation is an outburst of anger? What should you do instead? Anger is a big issue. It's something all of us deal with, and most of the time it starts with aggravation, which leads to frustration, which becomes anger and may become what the Bible calls wrath. And then there are the consequences of that outburst. What should you do instead? We're going to take a look at that together. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker, and this is the Mighty Oaks Daily Devotional. Anger is something that all of us have experienced. It is, again, that irritation that leads to frustration, that leads to anger. You feel it building up inside of you, and then you explode on someone else. Or maybe you're not an exploder. Maybe you're a do something sinister. You're the kind of person that kind of is the passive aggressive, go behind their backs or whatever. You need to get even. You need to make it right. You need to get a hold of this situation and control what is happening. So often anger, after that frustration, that feeling of anger, it really is a lack of control. I need to get control of this situation. People are not treating me the way that I think they should, or they're not doing what I think they should, and I'm going to show them. This is an entirely natural and normal situation. I spend a lot of time with veterans, and so many veterans who have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and anger is certainly a symptom or an indication of someone who's dealt with trauma and is experiencing so many of the related issues. But what should we do instead? The Bible is clear on this. There is righteous indignation. There is a righteous anger against sin, and that certainly exists, but that's not what we're talking about most of the time. Most of the time, it's a child or a spouse or a coworker or someone out on the road that does something we disagree with, and we've been pushed to our limit. The book of James has a lot to say about a lot of different things. It's a very practical book of the Bible. But if you were to look in the New Testament, book of James, James chapter 1 and verse 19. The author here says this. He says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath." Swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. And then he goes on. I think it's interesting, this pairing. That's verse 19. Verse 20 says, "For the wrath of man works not the righteousness of God." Isn't that an interesting pairing? He says, hey, here's what you need to do. You need to be quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to get angry, that outburst. Why? Because the wrath of man, the outburst of anger, the seizing of control, the making someone pay, it doesn't work the righteousness of God. God has a plan that's bigger than yours, and God has things that he's working to accomplish outside of your ability to control. And your outburst of anger, again, righteous indignation, that's a separate topic. But your outburst of anger, your frustration that leads to anger, that leads to that seizing of control, however you do that, that is not in line with God's plan. Instead, God would say, and certainly James in this passage says, what you need to do is listen a little bit longer. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever had one of those moments where you exploded or acted out in anger, said something unkind, and you wish you had listened a little bit longer because you didn't fully understand what was taking place, or you wish you hadn't said that right when you said it? So listening a little longer so you fully understand what's going on. Why are they acting that way? Why is that happening? Why has this taken place? Let me listen a little bit longer. Let me be really slow to speak. I may regret 1 second after saying it that I said what I said. I've certainly had moments like that one, many of them. Listen more. Speak less. And it says be slow to wrath. Don't excuse away bad behavior. I say this often, there is never an excuse for behaving badly. There may be reasons, they did this or this happened or that happened or whatever. Those are reasons, but they're not excuses. They don't excuse you behaving badly. When you feel that anger coming up in your heart, Ask yourself what's really causing it. Do you fully understand the situation? Are you getting ready to say something that you'll regret? Maybe what you need to do is back away, walk away, come back later and engage in a meaningful way when the emotion is down. Listen, today you're going to have moments where what seems to be the reasonable response is a response in anger. But don't ever forget that the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of God. In fact, you and everyone else in your life will be better if you will just listen more and say less and be very slow to respond. It's amazing how God can use us in difficult situations if we'll allow him to, and how we can disqualify ourselves from being used when we allow our emotions in the moment to gain control. What do you do when what seems reasonable is to respond in anger? Trust God. Allow God to deal with whatever the situation is. There may be an appropriate response from you. Do that if you can. But listen more, say less, and be very slow to respond. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow for another Mighty Oaks Daily Devotional. For more information about the Mighty Oaks Foundation and the work that we do for veterans, active duty service members, and first responders, please visit mightyoaksprograms.org.